Good morning, everyone. I see we've got some people starting to come in. This is really exciting. This is a session on pre-writing and drafting strategies for children and adolescents. If you want to take the chat box and use it as an opportunity to introduce yourself, that would be fine. So just say what your name is maybe and what school you're at and what age of children you teach. Excellent. So I've got some 6th grade teacher and 2nd grade teacher. So I've taught writing to children across a lot of different age spans, but spent lots and lots of time with students who were in middle level, so grade 7, 8, and 9. But I've taught children very, very young and also high school. And right now I work with pre-service teachers who are learning to teach writing. Excellent. So this PowerPoint presentation, we only have like 15 or 20 minutes. And so this PowerPoint presentation has more on it than you'll probably be able to really use right in this 20 minutes. But I made this available to Courtney Grant. And also if you email me, I don't mind sending anything to you that I have. And so you can take some of these to other places. Go ahead and sign in. So they're hoping that people will sign in for these sessions. We'll wait a couple, let me check my clock. Yeah, we got about 2 more minutes before we get started, but go ahead and you can either use the QR code or you can use the bit.ly. So remember, this is pre-writing, drafting strategies for children and adolescents. I think most of you are taking preparation time or working during your lunch today. So I really appreciate you being here. All right, admit. All right, it's 11. It's 11:45, so I think we're ready to go. So again, I appreciate you coming. I know that as teachers that sometimes it's hard to find time to go to the restroom and do other things. And the fact that you're taking time out during your day to do this is really wonderful. And I really appreciate all that you do. I know this has been a really hard year. And I hope that some of the stuff that I'm going to show you today will be helpful and wonderful to you. All right. So just some things about writing before we begin. There's these important notes is that in writing, there's this thing that students need, and one of those things is working memory. And that working memory helps the learners organize their thinking. And teachers actually can't change very much about working memory, but they can do things to support students in using the working memory that they have. And then the other important part about writing is there's topic knowledge, right? So you can't write something when you don't have any topic knowledge to put in. And so a lot of supporting writers and writing strategies is going to come from places where you either help writers use the working memory that they have access to, or you provide not a lot additional content knowledge, time to think about what their content knowledge is. And so we're going to think about it in those frames. For pre-writing support, there's this is the framework that we are going to work off of. But basically everything you're going to do to support students in pre-writing and drafting is going to be about verbal exposition, so talking about stuff. And here's some examples. So discussion, debate, drama, oral retelling, and then the speech to text. Or it's about visual exposition, so making something non-linguistic but visual through charts and drawings and other kinds of arts-based support. There's also informal written language that you can use in order to support writing development. And then there's formal written language. And that is the kind that most of us think about when we are thinking about writing support. That's when I was a kid and the teacher would tell us how to do ladders of abstraction and write outlines. And so, what I would like to help you think about is all the ways in which students can benefit from having pre-writing and drafting support across multiple modalities. So instead of just making an outline, so what's at least one more way that's either visual or verbal that can support students in doing their writing? And again, these slides should be available to you. So through the conference, if they're not, go ahead and email me and I'll email them to you. And we may not be able to talk about all these things today because of this is a shorter session, but we'll get through as much as we can. So for verbal exposition, one of the best things to do for students is to have them engage them in a discussion. So ask them to tell somebody what they want to write about. So, and it's very easy. It takes no money, no supplies, but turn to somebody and say what you'd like to write about is a very important thing to do. You also can have students do debates, drama, and then there's speech to text technology. So you can see that actually right now with the headings on my screen. So there's good technology where students just talk and then the text is just generated automatically for them. And things like your video conferencing software even will automatically keep transcripts for you. And then they have material to work with. So, and that works especially well for students with some disabilities. So I have this is a steps for a modified debate that you could use with students. And I've used this with students as young as third grade and all the way up through high school, but they're able to do this by, they've got to have access to a couple of different perspectives on some issue, usually short texts. Often you can use news articles, or you can even have them watch different videos, but they make different statements of support, and then they divide into groups to represent their perspectives. And then you do a little bit of small group caucusing, and then the students come up to the board or to the front of the room, or you could pass a microphone around even, and they just take turns making their points. And then you come back together and you caucus some more. And then they come back through there and you end the debate. So, and these steps are all on here, and you can try something like that. Another thing for verbal exposition, I noticed I have a lot of elementary teachers. is using these kinds of charts. And so this student then went through and looked at the jar of fears and said what the kinds of things they were afraid of, and then they wrote about it over here. So I have 6 fears. My biggest fear is germs. I don't want to get sick. I'm also afraid of people. I'm worried they won't like me. I have fears of public speaking, fires, and failure. And so this visual exposition then positioned the writer to realize that they had stuff to talk about. And they just went through and said, here, they organized it from biggest fear to least big fear. So another thing is that you can collect this, you can use stuff from whatever the student's experience is. And so then we have this big table and it's got all this candy on it that the students went out and collected. And then in Google Docs, let's see if we'll pull this up for us, we made a spreadsheet of all the different things that the students collected and then organized them in smallest to greatest. And then we made charts for those. And the students wrote from the charts, and they wrote that they collected this certain amount of candy, and that the candies came, the largest number of candies were Twix and peanut butter cups. And then, so then they're writing technical writing actually about mathematics and so forth. And you can bring, in the supplies and have them do this, but you can also have them do stuff like who's wearing what color shirt or what kind of shoes people have, whatever it would need to be, right? Where you make a visual spreadsheet of the stuff and then you have them write, well, we have the most of this, the second most of this, the least of this. You can also have students do collage before they write. So there's strut your stuff right here. This person wrote, can you tell this is a chessboard? And then they put these things together and then they wrote about chess and it being frustrating, and that doing that visual exposition prepared the students to do the writing because they had enough time to think about what they wanted to write. You can use informal written language. So you can pass along different drafts. So taking turns writing lines. You can do keyword outlines. Most pre-writing doesn't need complete sentences. So I know in elementary school, there's a focus on like getting them to write complete sentences. And certainly that is a good goal. But in the planning and the pre-writing, then it may actually end up being a deterrent. And so you've got to be strategic about that. There are also mnemonic devices that you can use to help students to plan writing. So there's the stop mnemonic and the dare mnemonic, which here's the link to that. Or you can do word or art remixes. And then there are some graphic organizers that rely specifically on structure that you can use as well. The word art remix is right here. So this is a student taking lines out of the Declaration of Independence and out of the I Have a Dream speech from Martin Luther King and putting them together into a new creation in order to start thinking about the teacher wanted to sign an essay about social justice. And so then all they did was just pull lines from other places and put them together. And then that served as an important pre-writing activity. So here's those sites about stop and dare. So if you want to go there, the stop planning strategy for argument writing is suspend judgment, take a side, organize ideas, and plan as you write. So the dare one, I think, is a little bit down here. Develop a position statement, add supporting ideas, report and refute counter arguments, and then end with a conclusion. So stop and dare actually are two strategies that have about $2 million worth of research funding spent on them. And so they might be worth trying. Another one I heard the other day was Oreo, O-R-E-O. So that's where you have an opinion is the O, and a reason is the R, and then the E is example, and then you restate your opinion. And instead of having that be the sum total of the pre-writing, you can use the Oreo strategy or something like that to be able to have students make a couple of Oreos and then pick a topic. So, because remember, part of the pre-writing is making sure that students are become aware of what they are capable of writing about. So here's a pyramid organizer. So this is where the student wrote about their pet. So the Brownies is a Chinese breed of a dog, actually. So Brownies isn't a food. So this is what happens, with Brownie during the day. And in order to prepare that, then the student used this pyramid organizer where they listed the important topics, important ideas at the top, and then they listed subordinate ideas at the bottom. You can do a headline poem. So this is one that I did with students in Albuquerque in the spring. In a headline poem, you take here's the headline from whatever news source, and then you take each of those words and you end the line of poetry with it. So an acrostic, you take the letters of a phrase like friend. So, and then they come up with a sentence that starts with an F and a sentence that starts with an R and so forth. But in this headline poem, you take the actual headlines, the words from the headlines, and then you try and think of a phrase where you can end the line with that. So, and there are endless possibilities in that. And then last, formal written language, which was what's more common for students. So we have focus listing. You can do genre analysis with students, where you help them identify the key features of whatever genre is you're trying to have them write, and then what are the essential characteristics, and then what are the optional features. You can do question capture or sentence expansion. So here's a question capture model. So the teacher asks with a sentence and then wrote those sentences in a paragraph. So what did Alexander Graham Bell invent? Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Why did he care about sound? He wanted to learn about sound because his mother and wife were deaf. And so then anchoring them through the writing by having them answer those questions is a very easy way to help students start grabbing some text. Okay, and then for sentence expansion, we can do this together. So a student, we have a sentence, we are learning about writing about, I'll say, supporting student writing. So the presenter showed some slides. We watched the slides. So in a sentence expansion model, the student generates some text, right? So a couple of sentences, but then you take each of those sentences and you make it the beginning of its own paragraph. So now you're learning about supporting writing. There are a lot of strategies. Let's see, students can learn about visual and verbal support. Printed some slides. The slides had links. There were also student examples. We watched the slides. We also introduced ourselves. we shared our attendance. So now we have this. And if you're going to keep this going with this expansion model, then you do it again. And you can do this pretty much indefinitely. So have the students take their sentences from the paragraphs, and now each of those sentences again becomes a new topic sentence for a paragraph. And that's a way to grow writing, where the writing ends up maintaining an organization structure. Because often when we say, oh, you need to write more, to students, they try and put a bunch of stuff on the end, and that doesn't help them come up with something coherent. But in this frame, you actually can take the writing that the students do, and then by helping them keep popping it out, then you can help them maintain the structure as you're going through. So here's my final tip, and then I'll ask you if what you want to spend more time on or hear more about. But I think it's important to try and use 2 or more strategies from each of these different types. So for each of the writing assignments. So coming up and just saying, all right, we're just gonna make an outline, isn't gonna be as helpful as if you do more than one of these, especially from more than one modality, more than one type of planning. So it's not wasted time, and the students they produce more text. So their text is more coherent and higher quality. They have opportunity to invest in all these things. I also think it's important to encourage children to try different strategies and become aware of which ones are more helpful to them. So some students may not want to do a whole lot of drawing or a whole lot of arts-based stuff, but other students will find that spending that time like really thinking about that helps them. And so students need to be actively thinking about what is useful for them, and then it's okay to give a choice. So sometimes people ask me about assessment. So like, how do you score it? So I think you can go ahead and give a few points for completion if you absolutely must, in order to help the students do the thing or feel like it's an important enough thing to do. But pre-writing really is about getting your thinking in order and deciding on a topic and mustering your motivation and things like that. And so it's not as great of an idea to assign a lot of points and make it really formal and make a lot of rubrics and scoring guides and things like that. You just want them to participate in the activity so that they can get some ideas about what it is they have to say. And then for younger children and other groups, sometimes the pre-writing strategies here might be sufficient to constitute writing practice. And so having students do something like this, so they make a collage and they are able to write something, sometimes that would be the writing assignment. Instead of having them write a more extensive essay and then growing it out like we did with the sentence expansion. So it's okay to make those decisions about what you want to spend your time on. But in the end, the whole idea is to give children practice, as much writing as practice as possible. And if you can, some writing practice pretty much every day is going to be useful. So let's see. Are there any questions? Is there anything you would like me to talk more about? I think we're almost done. I'm going to check my schedule. Good. So is there anything you'd like me to because I went through kind of fast because this is a lunch session. So is there anything you want me to go back to? Is there anything that you want me to talk about more?
You spend some more time on the visual exposition, more ideas on that for the younger kids?
Okay. Yeah, here is the slide about the visual exposition. So I think so. I showed the jar of fears, and then also you can have students draw at any point during the writing process. So sometimes we have students draw a picture and then write something, and that's fine. But also you can have them write something and then draw, and then write something and then draw again. You also can have them trade papers and try and draw what each other are writing about, or use a drawing as a response. So you can do stuff like that. Another thing with the image juxtaposition, that is collage, and you can do collaging with stuff that's in your classroom, like tape and scissors and all those things, and glue, or there's a lot of ways that you can do that with digital stuff, such as you can take a PowerPoint slide like this, actually, and you can pull images onto the PowerPoint and just use those things. So let me see if I can grab, go to Yahoo and just find some images about writing, and then just put those right next to each other. So images, and it doesn't matter which ones you use. So usually you want to click fully on this and then stick it on my desktop, and then I grab and put it over here. And then you just find another image and have them put it beside them. What's also really helpful for something like this, doing this digitally, is it gives them lots of practice with using the mouse, and also with making things smaller and bigger, which is really important for little kids. So little children's hands, their bones in their hands aren't fully developed like an adult's. And so when we're asking them to do these fine motor tasks in terms of writing, then it shouldn't surprise us that they're not going to be all that great at it because their bones just aren't working. So it isn't just about the schema in their brain and things like that. It's that there's lots of physical things going on with them. And so, but giving them these opportunities to do this kind of stuff, especially with art or with sculpture and clay, and like just really using their fingers and using their hands and rubbing things together and patting it down, is actually really important motor coordination stuff for students to be able to do things like write with a pencil, but also in like using a keyboard, which is another it's another skill that's really quite complex for kids to figure out how to use, and also just the dexterity to do it. And so so these kinds of strategies, especially for younger children, they support their ability to think of ideas and to ruminate on stuff and to decide how they're going to invest their identity. But they also play this really critical role in ensuring that students have opportunities to consistently develop the motor skills necessary to do the writing tasks. And then, like I said, there's lots of different sorts of graphic organizers that can be used with kids. Often, here's a graphic organizer that's heavily based on the visual rather than the more strictly organizational. And those ones with pictures like this tend to be better for young children. You can find a lot of these on the internet. And most of the time, so people are trying to use these and they're fine. You just have to make sure that it's actually going to fit the kind of text that you really are wanting. So, because like here's cause and effect. Most of the time when we're reading stuff with kids, sometimes you notice the cause first and then the effect, but often the effect is what is noticed. And then you've got to go back and hunt down the cause. And so if you're going to use that with children, then you've got to think about whatever text you're reading, does the graphic organizer actually match the text that you're trying to work with? Or if you're wanting them to write a text and you're going to have them use a graphic organizer in order to do it, then does the structure of this graphic organizer support the kind of writing you really want them to do in the end? So, and here's another one. This is a more linear kind of mapping. And again, it's got a lot of visual elements. And the question is, do these visual elements actually support the thinking that you want the students to do? So like here it says, who's the main character? And it's in a bubble. And so are the students going to understand what the connection of a speech bubble is, or a cloud is, to the concept of the main character? And I don't know if they will. So you could ask them, but I'm not sure. But this heart, right, with the warm fuzzy, that's a better match. So you have to, with those visual elements, it's really important to make sure that those visual pieces are doing the work that you want them to do, and that they're giving the students the sort of idea that you actually want them to come up with and use. And then on the last thing we were looking at it, here's a Venn diagram. And we often have students use Venn diagrams for comparison, right? So you have characteristics of one on one side and characteristics of one on the other, and then the commonalities are in the middle. But notice on this Venn diagram, and actually most Venn diagrams that we ask students to make, you only have a little tiny space for what's the same. And the reason why that could be a problem is because often when we're trying to work with students to get them to do critical thinking, what's the same is actually the more important idea. And so if you give them a Venn diagram that doesn't have a lot of space for that, they won't focus on it. So they'll put more things in the other parts of the circle that have more space. And so when you want them to really focus on, here's this text, and here's this text, or here's this idea, and here's this idea, and what's the same is important to you, then you really have to make sure that that overlapping space in the middle is huge or big enough for them to write, and that it suggests that the structure of that visual organizer suggests to them what the important ideas are in your lesson. So, because if they get this one right here, suggests that what is similar is not important at all. And so, and therefore, young people will not attend to that. So, but I like graphic organizers. So here's another one. So this story is about, and here's the facts. And the ice cream is very fun, but it may not, the idea of the ice cream may not suggest what you want it to students automatically. And so if there's some tie-in to that conceptually, or something you want them to think about, then you'll have to tell them pretty explicitly. So, and actually that's a pretty fun idea right there. Okay, so thank you for that question. Let's see if there's anything else. All right, it's 12:15, so I want to be good with your time. So again, I really appreciate you coming. I think that I can't thank you enough for being teachers in this district and for caring about kids writing. And please email me. Here's my email again, in case you join the session afterwards, if there is anything else that I could ever do for you. And have a good day.
have you ever taught Lucy Calkins?
Uh-huh.
Or have they have that lots of strategies to implement these writing skills. It's a very comprehensive program. It's difficult to almost to teach, but what do you think about that program?
You know, I think Lucy Calkins, the program has gone through a couple of different iterations, and she's trying to do, I think she's trying to improve it, and I think she's trying to make it more culturally responsive. And I think that those are good things.
Okay.
So, but I would tell a teacher never to use, you know, like never to give all of your teacherly agency and authority over to any program, even programs that are really good, because there's always going to be some things, and hopefully, you know, maybe it's small, maybe it's big, but there's always going to be some things where you're going to need to say, you know what, I need to adjust this for the
Okay.
kids that are in front of me.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Lucille. Have a good day. I'm gonna go ahead and close this out.